And we are live on the True Mets Talk podcast, Mets trade deadline edition on this lovely Saturday following that dominant performance out west in San Francisco with the Mets winning over the Giants by a score of 8-1. Of course, we did the post game last night, so make sure to tune into that stream if you missed it. But this stream right here is going to be dedicated to all things MLB trade deadline because it's going to start ramping up. It's going to start getting sweaty, honestly, with all the news and reports that are going to be coming out here over this weekend. And as we can tell with this Mike Puma report, first and foremost, Zach, with several teams on the bubble as buyers and sellers, Mets officials view this weekend as the decision point for many of those teams. The team brass plans to ramp up the process beginning Sunday night, as early as tomorrow, when more specific trade targets and scenarios will start being discussed among club officials. So we are right here. We are so very close, and we've already seen a trade, and we broke that down on the channel. And Gregory Soto, who will probably be joining the team tonight in San Francisco and could be available to come out of the bullpen tonight, and what is the brand new acquisition of the New York Mets in the bullpen. First and foremost, Zach, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Feeling great after that win. It was a win where the Mets didn't have to stress too much, and even though the Yankees couldn't get the job done against the Phillies, we were able to maintain our half-game lead on them. Finally hit that 60-win number and are now fifth in the overall standings in the MLB. I believe we are fourth in the NL. Feeling good, excited for tonight, excited to see Soto get his first appearance as a Met, hopefully, given hopefully the Mets will be in position to let him get out there, and hopefully what will be another stress-free win and winning a series tonight. But we're not here to talk about what's going on tonight, what happened yesterday. We're here to talk about all things trade deadline with the Mets.
Absolutely. Everyone, please make sure to follow Zach over on his X account for a lot of mock trades. Does a lot of good work. Just identifying a lot of trade targets that the Mets can go after in these next about 5 days or so. At Sunny Days Zach over on X. You know where to find me on all my social medias at True Mets Talk as well. Drop those comments in the live chat. We are really wanting this to be an interactive stream. We want to hear what you all want from the Mets and want to see and think we're going to see from the New York Mets and David Stearns. And as always, to help the channel keep growing, please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these conversations. If you're new, if you're a first-time listener, subscribe and hit those thumbs up buttons a lot. It helps a lot. And we definitely appreciate the support in that aspect by hitting the thumbs up buttons. Okay. I think the first thing that we need to start off here is a quote from David Stearns, yesterday, because we've been talking about a lot of trade deadline targets. We've been talking about a lot of different tiers and different levels of trade deadline targets, from, the smaller moves, the mid-level moves, or maybe even potential blockbuster scenarios that the Mets can find themselves in. And I think a lot of Mets fans, especially that have been questioning David Stearns, they want to know and they want to see David Stearns in action on a lot of these names that are a little bit more of the quote unquote blockbuster type. And from David Stearns here, you can say whatever you want about this quote. It could be just good media training and, having good PR skills. But David Stearns was asked, by reporters, could the Mets make a major acquisition, at least to the starting rotation at this trade deadline? And this is going to segue perfectly into a name that we're going to be talking about here in just a little bit, that I personally think the Mets are going to be in on. And we haven't heard much smoke, but I actually talked about this name yesterday on the channel. That's a spoiler alert. But David Stearns, in response to that question, said, I don't know how many quote unquote raise the ceiling type players are going to be traded, talking about the starting rotation market. But he says, if those guys are available, we will be involved. What do you make of that quote, first and foremost? Do you think that he's just blowing smoke up, Mets fans' rear ends, or do you think that, the Mets have a big move starting pitching wise up their sleeve this deadline?
I think first and foremost, what you said about David Stearns being media trained and having a great PR team behind him is definitely true. I mean, this is someone who does not let on much. He He is answering every question and creating 2 or 3 more questions with those answers. He is not letting on to what his plans will be. Other than the fact that they will be in the market for a relief pitcher, everything else has been an open-ended answer. He's not given us a definitive clue to what he may be doing on the front of starting pitcher, like he was mentioned in this interview, and then elsewhere, whether that's center field or any other offensive upgrade. So, do I think we will be going for a starting pitcher? I do. I think there will be names out there, and we'll get into that later. But there will be some of these raise the ceiling type players, guys that can be anchors for a team, whether it's just for this postseason or going forward for a couple years. The Mets will be in the market for that if they are available, which I do think they will be. And the Mets will pounce if the package going back doesn't impact what David Stearns' plan is going forward with this Mets roster. Not removing any of the big guns, and like with the trade with Gregory Soto, they did not move anyone that will be of immediate impact for the Mets. With Aracena going back to the Orioles, he was someone that is a few years away at best. So I could see the Mets definitely moving on from guys like that, and then moving depth, positional depth, i.e., the right-handed pitching depth that the Mets do have in the deeper parts of the minors.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to revisit the trade from yesterday, a little bit of an overview for those of y'all who missed it. Left-handed pitcher, fireballer, but a guy that has some control issues, can definitely be that second lefty. And a little bit of a different look than Brooks Raley. Gregory Soto is now a New York Met, and the New York Mets, especially with the recent re-rankings from the MLB pipeline in the Mets prospects, in the organization, they traded away the number 19th overall prospect in the farm system, Aracena, right-handed pitcher, fireballer, a little bit more of a bullpen guy rather than the trajectory of a starting pitcher, but he throws 98. He can dial it up to 100. So he's got a lively arm, and that's probably why the Orioles were pushing for him to be included in that trade. But then also, I forgot the second guy's name, not in the Mets top 30. So, it was a
Cameron
high that
something.
Cameron something, I think Foster, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, it doesn't really matter. 19th overall prospect. It's basically a bullpen arm of the future for a bullpen arm right now is the way that I assess that trade that happened. But I agree with you, right? And I guess we don't need to spend too much time talking about the prospects because I do feel like, the Mets are in a position to go all in right now if they find a trade, and no matter what prospect is named, maybe outside of a guy like Tong, Benj, etc., in that core of players, everybody else is available, whether it's MLB ready talent like Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, etc., or whether it's, the prospects in the top 10. Drew Gilbert has been a name that we've been talking about a lot. David Stearns also, was asked about Drew Gilbert with his recent, fantastic performance in AAA, whether he is going to be part of the outlook for the Mets in the second half or whether he's going to be on the trade block. David Stearns said that he's on the radar. I know that we talked about this quote from Stearns on Drew Gilbert yesterday, but we don't know whether that is for other teams or for the New York Mets to promote within in the second half. But I think that Drew Gilbert, if the Mets don't add a center fielder, and we'll be talking about center field options in this stream, so don't go away. We are just getting started here on this stream. I think that even though Stearns said that there are no position prospects that they are looking to bring up in the second half, if the Mets don't get a center fielder externally and a guy like Robert, Mullins, or whoever else, we'll talk about another option potentially, I think that Drew Gilbert would be the one guy if he continues to change David Stearns' mind and potentially patrol center field to add a little bit more upside with the bat than what you get with Tyrone Taylor. Drew Gilbert is no Tyrone Taylor with the glove. He's speedy, though. He's got a pretty lively arm. I've always thought of Drew Gilbert as a five-tool player, and that is his upside in the major leagues. He just has to start piecing it together more consistently, and as of recent, he has. So I think that's really the positional player outlook, to be honest. And this is the main question of them all from River. Will Drew Gilbert be traded or called up post-trade deadline? That is basically the only two options. As we mentioned with Drew Gilbert, he is Rule 5 eligible after this season, so the Mets don't want to lose him for virtually nothing. They didn't bring him over in that 2023 trade deadline for virtually nothing. So he's either going to be traded for someone that can help them win immediately, a little bit more of a veteran presence, or he's going to be on this team contributing on the field in a Mets uniform. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, Drew Gilbert's an interesting name that is definitely garnering a lot of praise by Stearns as of recent, and probably or definitely upping his trade value and maybe his value within the organization, given his performance over the last 30 days. Last night we had spoken about him, and I thought that he definitely could be an option for the Mets to bring up at center field. But after kind of thinking that over overnight, and then having a little bit of a conversation with Jack Ramsey on X, I have kind of turned from that, and I do not believe he will actually be an option for the Mets. I think if he was amongst their plans already, he would probably be on the 40 man. And given his Rule 5 eligibility, like you've mentioned, it seems a bit bizarre for them to, at this moment in time, call him up, especially with the Mets in a pennant race and the not knowing what you're going to get from him when called up. These guys do tend to struggle coming up. He struggled a lot in AAA. He's just finding recent success. So you could run into a situation where you worry about his ability to perform here at the major league level, especially when you don't have much of a leash or leeway to give him, in the final months of the season. So I think this is someone that has definitely raised their trade value, and that's where the Mets might be leaning towards at this moment in time. And if it's not trading him before this deadline, it might be trading him in the offseason, especially given the Mets' depth up the middle with Jet Williams, Carson Bench, and then someone a little bit further away in AJ Ewing.
So what you just mentioned right there is a very important point for me to drive the point home and saying that, if we are going to be worrying about these prospects that we have been having in our farm system for the past couple of seasons and what their performance could be on a win now team, the Mets are going to be a win now team for quite some time down the road. And prospects, with as much as this fan base loves to keep all these prospects, if we're going to be scared to call them up, in fear of them making mistakes at the major league level, then you might as well just trade them all away. If that is what the idea is, like, there's no sense in keeping a 24, 25-year-old prospect in the farm system, not trading him, but also not entrusting him on the field and on the diamond when it matters the most in a win now season. That just doesn't make too much sense to me. So if you are a person that wants to see, prospects stay in this organization, if that's fine, that's okay. But we also have to start conversating about them being able and willing to come up. And yeah, they'll make mistakes, but they can't sit in the farm system for forever. And that's kind of the competing forces that I don't understand for some people that are playing both sides of the fence with that, I guess, notion. So that's just an external topic of conversation surrounding the prospects. But let's get into the part of this live stream that you really all want to talk about, and that are some names that could be available at this trade deadline. And this is not an exhaustive list, right? There's a lot more options. I think the recent report is that the St. Louis Cardinals are officially making a couple of their arms available in a guy like Steven Matz, former Met, also Ryan Helsley, who I've talked about, who would be an just electric addition to this back end of the bullpen, who would be a rental as well. Not sure with him being a rental what the Cardinals would want to command, but you see other bullpen options here with Brock Stewart, Anthony Bender, and David Bednar. But most importantly, before we talk about these names and kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive, the Mets needs. Basically, I mean, maybe I could switch around center fielder with the rental starter, or we will see that there are starters that have controllability as well that we'll talk about in this stream. I think the pen arm is clearly the first priority for David Stearns. He's been very adamant about that. I think a DH option, a solidified DH option, is probably the last of their concerns, and they will worry about that in the offseason. And you can kind of flip-flop whether a rental starter, a starting pitcher in this rotation to add into the second half, or a center fielder is more important. But those are the core four needs of the New York Mets right now. Are they they going to address every single one of them? No, I don't think that's really realistic. We'll see how many more moves the Mets have in them. It'll be at least one or two. I have no doubt about that, but I don't think that we're going to be looking at 4 or 5 different moves moving forward. It would help if there is a blockbuster type deal to maybe address 2 needs with 1 trade, but we'll see what happens. And the market has to set itself first for that to happen. So, who do you want to talk about on this list first and foremost? I know you gave me a list of names as well that you are liking this trade deadline. Let's just start off with who you want to talk about on the left-handed side.
Yeah, let's start on the righty pen arm. There's a few names up there in David Bednar, Brock Stewart, and Anthony Bender. I know you put out a mock trade for David Bednar, and that is someone that will be of the higher tier right-handed pen arms. But I'd like to start with someone like Brock Stewart, and there's a few reasons why. I think given what is available and what will be asked for in these right-handed pen arms, there's going to be guys that like Anthony Bender, like David Bednar, that are probably going to be garnering a bit more of a return in terms of prospects, given their success in the major leagues so far, and given the fact that they are both under contract for, I believe, 2 more years after this one. Brock Stewart is of the same class in terms of the fact that he is under contract for 2 more years, but he's a little bit older and he has a lot of injury concerns. He's dealt with injuries throughout his career. He's been pretty plagued by them, but he is someone that will be cheap, and he just feels like a Stearns guy because even though he doesn't have any options left, he is someone that you have to worry about the sustainability and the longevity of him staying in the bullpen, but that almost creates someone that is flexible in that regard because you have the ability to call up guys like Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean to fill that void. And depending on what happens with a guy like Rico Garcia, he could also fill that role if that's someone the Mets can somehow hold on to post-deadline. Brock Stewart, when you break down his Savant page, it's glowing red, and he is someone that would really slot nicely into this pen. Pulling up his Savant page, I believe he has one of the higher K rates in the league, while also not walking too much. He's also someone that tends to miss bats and doesn't allow much hard hits, which is something the Mets would really be welcome to adding. And just given the cost, it feels like a David Stearns move. It really, really does.
Yeah, and in a trade deadline full of talent, as I also pull up, because I haven't really talked about Brock Stewart much at all. And I think that the primary talking point amongst the Twins is clearly Duran and what they're gonna do with him at the trade deadline. I think the Phillies are going to be interested there as well. But I think
100%.
Brock Stewart is definitely a name to keep an eye out on. Obviously, they have Colomb from the left side as well, Griffin Jacks, like that. Their relievers could be available. It's plentiful. And yeah, I mean, it is just glowing with red here with the expected ERA, expecting batting average as your expected stats. The velo, I guess he is kind of a hard thrower, but he's not going to be over the top, right? He's approaching mid 90s, maybe 96 on a good day. And yeah, this is something that the chase rate, I guess, is a little bit left to be desired, but he's kind of middle of the road there in terms of percentiles. But yeah, Brock Stewart, definitely age 33. Outside of the injury concerns, is a name that is very underrated, and we haven't really, talked about him too much. That's why I was happy that you brought him up. And the same thing could be said for Anthony Bender. I mean, I don't see many Mets fans talking about Anthony Bender a lot. He's having a career year with the sub-2 ERA. So I kind of put those guys into the same category. Maybe not the styles of pitchers, but definitely in the underrated aspect in a team, in an organization like the Mets, who are going to be prioritizing and looking every which way for bullpen help. Maybe they don't go out and get the household name in David Bednar that I'd like to talk about a little bit here as well. But, maybe they do go the Brock Stewart route or an Anthony Bender route. I think that David Stearns, like you said, has profiles, especially of pitchers, that he definitely likes to target. I think that Brock Stewart is definitely one of those guys. Is he a rental by chance, or is he
2 years of
under
control.
control? 2 years of
two
control. So
years of
there you go.
arbitration too, and he will be cheap.
Ah,
He's making under $1 million this year. I think his contract is sitting somewhere around 800,000 this year. I'm assuming in arbitration that number will go up over the $1 million number, but he will be a cheap option and someone the Mets will have control of for 2 more years. And yeah, just given everything that he can provide for this bullpen, given Stearns' comments, he doesn't seem to want, or at least he's not letting on to the fact that he wants to go for a true setup man. He's leaning towards, I guess, a setup man by committee with the likes of Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, probably a little bit out of favor in that regard, but will be there. And then whoever else they bring in a Brock Stewart, obviously Brooks Raley will be here, and Gregory Soto is someone who may see some time in the later innings, but probably less so than those other names that I mentioned.
yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of Brock Stewart, because I didn't know that he had 2 years of arbitration left. At 33 is kind of surprising too, but
I
I
like
guess it's just
Brazaban.
kind of what happens. But that's kind of like a Brazaban
Yeah.
2.0 type of deal where Brazaban had multiple years of control left. He had a stellar first half with the Marlins last season, came over to the Mets uniform, didn't really have all that much success, but clearly, was working with this pitching lab in the offseason and they got him right. And now he is shining in 2025 for the New York Mets, again, with that controllability. So, Brazaban's also a little bit younger than a guy like Brock Stewart, who I just mentioned is 33 years old. But, I think with bullpen, age is but a number until you're approaching 40 plus, right? And we just saw the Phillies get a 40-plus-year-old reliever in David Robertson, who was out of a job until just recently. So, yeah, that's the one position and one area of baseball where I don't even, think twice about the
Mm-hmm.
age. I don't even care if someone's 38, 39. If they can throw the ball, for an inning and be dominant, then so be it. I like it. So, and I want to address this comment right here from Jay, really driving the point home about Jose Ramirez. And this list is meant to be a little bit more realistic. We'll never shut the door on our wants being a little bit higher, right? With the caliber of like an
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuel Clase from the reliever market or a guy like Jose Ramirez. I think that if the Mets and the Guardians were, in talks about a blockbuster 2.0, especially after that Lindor deal between the two organizations, I would certainly welcome it. Ramirez is getting up there in age, but he does have 3 years of control left after signing that extension with them. I think that's someone that they will part ways with. I'm just not convinced it's going to be at the deadline. That seems like more of an off-season blockbuster trade to happen rather than rushing to try to get a package done for him at this deadline. So I hear you. I mean, he would definitely be on my list if I thought it was realistic and on this list of our Mets wants if we thought it was realistic at this deadline, but I just don't think it is. So the Mets lineup can always get better, especially at third base. I mean, with the ability of Brett Baty to play second base now, I think that still leaves a need potentially moving forward at third base for the Mets. Or if Brett Baty keeps up this production, he's shown glimpses of being potentially that everyday third baseman for the New York Mets moving forward. And, Zach is a huge fan of Brett Baty. He's been singing the tune of Brett Baty since the beginning of the season. Even when Brett Baty started off this season very slow, I wasn't as much of a believer in that vision, but I'm starting to buy into what Brett Baty is doing, and I'm seeing a lot better processes from him. So hopefully we continue to see that moving forward. So I like the names at the bottom of this list in terms of Brock Stewart and Anthony Bender. But if the Mets want to make a splash, if they want to make a splash for another controllable arm with David Bednar, I would also be really willing to make something like that happen. And we'll take a little bit of a further look at Mitch Keller, but that's also an organization that has the potential to package two arms, one a rotation arm, one a bullpen arm, to address two needs for any team, not, let alone the New York Mets, who need both of those positions anyway. So what are you thinking about, some of the higher, I guess, value targets of, let's say, David Bednar that has a year of control left, or let's say a rental in the recent report that we just saw before we went live on this stream, and a guy like Ryan Helsley, who is a guy that, and this is something that we have to understand about the bullpen. Coming into this season, given the age, etc., I was very, especially with how he performed last season, I was very skeptical that Edwin Diaz was going to opt out of his contract. Now, especially if he continues this production in the second half, I have no doubt in my mind he's going to opt out and want another extension with either the Mets or anybody else around this league that is willing to give him the top of the line money that, quite frankly, he deserves as being one of the best closers in baseball. And it would be a good idea. Do you buy into the idea that the Mets are thinking that same way and potentially getting ready for Edwin Diaz to opt out and finding a hybrid setup closer 2.0 that could be a fallback option if Edwin Diaz leaves? Or do you think that that's not even in the back of their mind and shouldn't be in the back of their mind at this trade deadline right now?
It has to be, but it can't. It can't impact your plans too much, because if they're only going to shop towards guys that could potentially fill that role, you're going to leave yourself a little bit shortchanged, and you're gonna close yourself off to other options that could be better fits and fit the need of the Mets more so. So I think while that definitely is something that is weighing on Stearns' mind, because I do not see him as someone extending Diaz for 3 years, say 3 years, 60 million, just adding another year onto the back end of his deal. It's a loaded question. I think that's something that you really cannot worry about right now, unless someone like David Bednar becomes truly available to the Mets. If the asking price isn't too high and you're able to swing a deal for someone like that. So while I do think it is something of concern and something to be thought of, I don't think it's something that can play too much of a part in this deadline.
Yeah, I also agree with that too, because then you're expanding the pool of prospects that you're going to need to give up, and we
Mm-hmm.
know that this Mets fan base doesn't like parting away with the prospects. And let's face it, like even for a rental and Helsley, you're not going to only have to worry about giving up the prospects of value, to the Cardinals and what they'll want, but you also have to think about extending him and what the figure of extending him will be, regardless of what happens with Edwin Diaz. So that's why I think that the controllability, especially a reliever that has controllability, I don't think Brock Stewart, as we just mentioned, with 2 years of control left after this year, is going to be an Edwin Diaz replacement by any means. He's just not meant to be one of those guys. There's a handful of those guys available on this market. I think the closest thing that you'll get without needing to extend a potential backup option is David Bednar. And that's because he has the next year of control in 2026. So, but I hope Edwin Diaz finishes out his career, finishes his career out in the Mets organization. I mean, with what he's done, in this bullpen, given how slow he started in this Mets organization after the trade back in 2019, when it was just an abysmal time for him, he has really won this fan base over. And maybe that also goes into the conversation of the Mets in terms of the reward factor of giving him a new contract. But, we've seen a lot of, I guess, closer contracts out there now, and what these closers are now being paid. And I just can't be 100% confident to tell you all that David Stearns is going to pay that premier of dollar for a closer. So I don't know. It's a philosophy kind of thing, I guess. But all right, let's transition a little bit more into the bats here. We got to touch upon Luis Robert Jr. for probably the millionth time here, because we keep on hearing Heyman specifically. Like, we've heard it all over from Pat Ragazzo, from pretty much everybody, Mark Feinsand. But John Heyman specifically keeps on putting out Robert Mets. Like they're involved, they're interested amongst a handful of other teams, whatever that means, however many teams that there are. I don't know, man. I want to believe it because I'm willing to take the flyer on Robert, maybe more so than a lot of other people. I don't think that he's going to be the surefire answer, but it doesn't hurt to take the chance on him. But like, it's just like too many posts about Robert Jr. to the Mets, and then I could just totally see some other team swooping in and making the deal for him, and we're like, wow, we just got teased to the max there. So, what do you think about Robert before we talk about this next name that you have been talking about even more so than Robert, and he's also an Oriole, and we'll see on the next slide here. But what do you think about the Robert Jr. Tweets about the Mets?
There's just so much smoke there, and it's hard to avoid that topic, and that topic will continue to come up through July 31st, whether the Mets do decide to trade for him or not, whether he goes to a competing team or even stays in Chicago. I think it all depends on what the White Sox will be asking for. Given his production over the last month plus, I think this is someone that could be garnering a bit more of a return than the Mets and Mets fans would be comfortable giving up. I know River just said in the comments, would you do Gilbert straight up for Robert Jr.? I think that's something that I would be inclined to do. But given the uncertainty there with Robert, I don't know if that's enough to give up. I know Nightingale did say that the White Sox are interested in the likes of Mark Vientos, whether that's able to get it done 1-for-1 or if they're going to be wanting a little bit more of high upside players that are somewhere in the Mets farm system, maybe in that top 15 to 30 range. It's going to be interesting to see what they do end up asking for. And I guess also something of note, he did sit last night with a groin injury, whether that's something of significance or was just kind of a smokescreen or was maybe just precautionary. That will have to play a factor and will definitely be something the Mets will be monitoring, because if a trade does at least get proposed and is tentatively accepted, he will 100% be going under rigorous medical examination by this Mets training staff. So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of smoke around Luis Robert, and I think this will be something that will be monitored closely by Mets fans and Mets beat reporters and the executives like David Stearns. It's just it's a good acquisition, and it's just something that is so unpredictable at this moment in time, given what other teams may be offering and what the White Sox may be asking for.
Yeah. I don't know how the White Sox view, I guess, the timetable of them needing to rush a Robert trade. They've been very lackadaisical on making that move, especially within the past year. Statistically, as of recent, he has shown glimpses, but the overall numbers still suggest that you can, I guess, buy a little bit low on him. But with the competition and the competing forces, maybe the price is being driven up to a point where the Mets are hesitant, I guess is the one thing that I would say. What would you rather have? You heard Nightingale surrounding Vientos's name with Robert Jr., Rivers bringing up Gilbert. What would you rather do? A 1-for-1 with Gilbert or Mark Vientos for Robert Jr.?
Well, I think I would probably lean towards Drew Gilbert, and this is why. I think trading Vientos, while it does solve one problem, at least potentially, it does also create another open hole at the DH position that the Mets would then have to go and either figure out externally or rely on a platoon there with the likes of Starling Marte and Ronnie Mauricio. And I don't know if the Mets necessarily want to do that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think of the two, where I think Vientos probably does get it done, I think Drew Gilbert might be the better option to be traded, just given what we've said already with the Rule 5 eligibility. I think with his stock increasing, given the recent performance, it's probably the better trade for the Mets, but also one that I don't know if the White Sox will be too keen on making. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. And I think until we can get a clear sign of what the White Sox will be asking for in return for Luis Robert, we won't really know what the Mets will be able to give up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good take. I mean, I would probably do either of those trades, but I think that I'd prioritize maybe at this point Drew Gilbert as well. I think I'm in line with you there. But we don't even know if that would get it done, from the White Sox perspective, like you just said. So, Frank's in the chat. There is a game going on that has implications on the NL East right now, and I mean the crosstown team didn't really get too great of news today with Aaron Judge and his elbow, man, going in for imaging. I mean, that's potential Tommy John right there, and that would be just a huge blow to the Yankees. I guess that's their entire team. It's not their entire team, but he's the heart and soul of that team. So, there was a play where I guess Aaron Judge threw a baseball in from right field out in Toronto. He was seen wincing in pain. they kind of blew it over, but he is getting an MRI imaging, and I guess they're going to get the final verdict at some point, maybe by the end of today, on where Aaron Judge stands. But yeah, the Phillies and the Yankees are playing right now. That game squared off, I think, at 105. The Phillies are already on top 1-0 going into the bottom of the first. So appreciate any updates on that, as I will be turning that game on after we are done with this live, but I am not watching it right now. So we will see what happens there if the Mets can get any help from the Yankees. But let's talk about, we talked about Robert, but let's talk about another bat that you have liked for quite some time. Maybe, and nobody's really talking about this guy from the Mets perspective, but he definitely fits into, what the Mets could use out in center field with a stronger bat, and that is Ramon Laureano. Now, Laureano is not a premier defender by any stretch of the imagination, especially up the middle and center field. He has played a plethora of games in center field, but that was probably earlier on in his career. I think it's around like 300 games I saw per his career splits on Baseball Reference in center field. So he knows how to play the position. He's only 31 years old still. He's going to be a rental, if I'm not mistaken. But the numbers right now, oh, one more year left. Okay, so even better. So even better. I mean, I would assume any club would exercise the option on Laureano. I mean, depending on what the value is, but I can't imagine that it's too great. 14 home runs. He's hitting above 270. So if you care about batting average, he's at 273, and OPS above 800, approaching 850. This is a very competent bat, and this is a bat that the Orioles probably don't really have much use for anymore. I mean, it helps that he has a club option as opposed to the rental and Cedric Mullins. But Laureano is the better option offensively 100% than Cedric Mullins. And I guess his fielding isn't, per the numbers, the range isn't great per the OAA, but the arm value, he's got a good arm, I guess, according to Baseball Savant. So I don't know if he is an option for the Mets, but if they are looking to upgrade center field, if Luis Robert Jr. doesn't really interest them and what they have to give up for Robert Jr., I could see something like this happening. He fits. I mean, this is a positional fit.
Yeah, one thing that you left out too on the Savant page, which is nothing of too much note, is the sprint speed. His sprint speed is kind of average, league average, and maybe that does play into how he could play out in center field. He's been manning the corners and right and left field this season, and we saw, in the Orioles series when they came to Citi Field, he did overrun a ball and let it drop in for a Jeff McNeil game-winning hit. So there is concerns there with how he could perform out in the outfield, but maybe, he is more comfortable out in center field. And given the strong arm, maybe he could play a bit more passively and play a bit deeper and come in on balls and let that arm come to play in throwing guys out, whether they're trying to advance and take the extra base or score on a single and coming home from second. So that's an option there, given what Stearns likes. I doubt that will be necessarily a center field option, but if they do make a trade, say Mark Vientos straight up for Luis Robert, he could easily slot comfortably into that DH position and man it full time for the rest of the season and even next year. And something the Mets would love to get, given his stats with runners in scoring position. They're not amazing, but they are much better than what we've been getting, and would add another righty bat to this lineup, something the Mets do need as they are fairly left-handed heavy. And then also, if, say, someone like Marte is on the move, he would offer you the ability to play the field, unlike Starling Marte, if you need to in case of emergency, whether Soto, Nimmo, or even Luis Robert does need a day off and needs to DH or even just completely sit. So it's a flexible option, maybe not the best defensive option, but much better offensively than what is really out there, given what is realistic for the Mets, not necessarily the top end.
So I missed it in your statement. Do you think that he would be a defensive option to play on a platoon basis in center field for the Mets?
Potentially. I think it would be, I think the Mets would be open to that. I don't know if they would necessarily, I don't think he would be the primary option in center field, given what they have.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure.
And I think this would be a trade that the Mets make if they get Luis Robert from Mark Vientos. I think other moves would have to happen, and other positions on this roster would have to open up for him to get a shot there.
So you're saying it would have to be an and situation with Robert and Laureano instead of just an or situation.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, listen, the chat is saying it. The chat likes Laureano. I like Laureano as well. I mean, he's a very competent bat. He's going to give you light years above what Tyrone Taylor is giving you offensively. But the main question is, under David Stearns, is he willing to have Laureano out there in center field? Because I'm assuming like they wouldn't bring him in to be a DH because Marte's there. So you have to get rid of Marte. And it seems like everyone thinks that Marte is just going to be on this team until the contract rides out for the second half. That's why I'm like, and that's why this offseason, I was like, dude, I know that he helped get Soto here, Juan Soto, that is.
Mm-hmm.
But he blocks so much that the Mets can do offensively in terms of making moves at this deadline because you have to worry about Starling Marte, taking up a spot, especially as a bench bat. And that could very well be if Marte wasn't on this team, that would be perfect and right up the alley for the New York Mets to bring Laureano in as that platoon DH option, depending on when Winker comes back. And I would even, with what he's putting up right now, for him to be an everyday DH option, that would also, especially with Vientos' struggles and the uncertainty of Vientos at this trade deadline as well, given some of the other, news and rumors about Robert, like we just talked about, I think Laureano would be a perfect fit for the DH spot, especially with that controllability aspect associated. So the Mets are just offensively, they're handcuffed, unfortunately, and they're going to have to move some pieces around if they are serious about adding anybody not named Luis Robert Jr. to this team, right? Because all the other bats, Laureano can play center field, but he's not a prototypical center fielder anymore. He's more so of a corner outfielder, I would say. And I think the Mets offensively are just handcuffed right now. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think that Robert Jr.'s defense, by the way, is better than Laureano's.
Light years better.
But I agree. I don't think the Mets would commit to playing Laureano in center field every single day. I don't think that they would.
Yeah,
He's got a lot of experience there in center field too, but I'm pretty sure that he's been playing more so corner outfield this season for the Orioles, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think he has only a handful of games out in center field. There's not much. There's not much there.
There's one this season. There's one
against the Mets. Oh, it's only one. I know it's against the Mets. I think the day after he let that game winning hit by Jeff McNeil fall, he moved to center field the next day. And if I remember correctly, Gary, Keith, and Ron, or maybe it was just Gary and Keith, had said in the booth that he is more comfortable in center field. So maybe this is something where his OAA is so low because he is playing an uncomfortable position, given what he's done previously in his career. But considering the Orioles aren't really giving him a chance out there, even with Cedric Mullins not playing the defense he once did, I think it's pretty telling that he is not as capable of doing it nowadays.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I agree. Maybe there is something to him playing out of position there in Baltimore that's kind of skewing some of the stats, but competent bat. I mean, he's going to be a 20+ home run candidate, a guy that I would love to have on this team and can be a versatile player. And I like the name. I just don't see how the Mets could make that happen without moving some pieces already that they have. So, all right, let's get into what River was stating in the chat earlier today in the report from Mike Puma. Zach, I know that the Mets play, and David Stearns especially plays his cards close to him, right? He holds his cards close to him. He doesn't really reveal too much. And so far, this next player that we're talking about specifically, I think the Mets are scheming something up. Like I've no facts that they are, right? I have nothing to say solidly that they are. I think personally that they are scheming up for this player. Starter, former Cy Young, Sandy Alcantara. I think the Mets are going to make a big push for him. I don't know why. My gut feeling, again, no facts surrounding it, but like I really do think that this is possible for the Mets, especially if they package a reliever into this deal. The asking price is set to be high. Again, I talked about Sandy and the trade outlook a little bit more in depth in my recent video as of yesterday. Go check that out. It's in the description down below. It just, the upside, he's been figuring some things out as of recent this season. I know the overall numbers in the Savant page don't look pretty. Really, nothing has looked good about the overall numbers for Sandy since 2022, which was his Cy Young season. We saw an immense drop off in 2023 before he went down with Tommy John surgery in the later stages of that season before he missed the entirety of 2024. Now he's back. He's trying to piece things together. He's still got a lively arm. I don't know, man. It just seems like something that the Mets would take a chance on, especially given that, he also has controllability associated with his contract as well. At worst, maybe he can slot in as a 3 or 4 in this rotation, and you can bump Montas down, maybe be flexible, a little bit more flexible with Clay Holmes at that point, maybe if that's the plan. But at best, he's your next ace if he ever figures it out again. I don't know, man. It just seems like something the Mets and David Stearns would want to invest in.
Yeah, you've heard talks for years now about Sandy Alcantara making his way to the New York Mets via either trade or in free agency once this contract is up. And I believe, I don't know, did you mention, is it 2 or 3 years of control? I believe it's 3, right? And they're all
He's got
club
two.
options.
So no, he's
It's
got two. So he's got next year, which is straight up next year, and then a club option for like
okay.
20 to 21 million in 2027. So it's two.
So that'd be something that Stearns does like. He likes his guys that have options, and this would be someone that could enter the lab and be someone who could potentially unlock part or maybe fully what he did back in 2022. I think this is all hinging on what the asking price of the Miami Marlins would be, because this would probably have to start with one of our top 5 prospects. And I would probably say Ronnie Mauricio would also have to be involved in that deal. I don't know what the Marlins' needs are in terms of their farm system and what they might need going for on the major league roster, but it would definitely be a haul going back to them. And I think if you could maybe package an Anthony Bender in this type of deal, you would be more inclined to do so. But I think this all hinges on what the Marlins do end up asking for. And I know I saw, who was it? Steven, who did mention Beatty for Sandy. That would be, not only would that hurt the major league team now of the Mets, but also that's not getting it done. That's going to cost way more than Brett Beatty. Maybe Brett Beatty a few years ago would have been a centerpiece of that deal, but given what he has shown, not as of late, but before this recent hot stretch, has shown that he probably does not have the value. Well, definitely does not have the value he once did. So it's interesting. I think I'm more open to Sandy as of recent than earlier in the season, given his recent stretch of performance. I think his last start against, I believe it was the Brewers. I'm not sure. The Padres. The
Padres 7 scoreless
very
innings.
good. And then there was a start before that, which was very good. I know he ended up allowing 4 runs, but I believe he also did go 7 innings in that start. And aside from the one big inning, he was very good. I think the most alarming here for me is while he was never a big strikeout guy, the walks have gone up, and the swing and miss stuff has seemed to elude him in his tools, and that's something that I think might be too much to try and fix, down the stretch of this season, unless he shows out in one more start that he has found it once again. So it's an interesting thing to look at, and I think it could be an option for the Mets. And if this was the option for the Mets, I think you are looking at potentially a 6-man rotation and a 7-man bullpen in August until the September call-ups do come, with the rosters expanding to 28 men. I don't think you can rely on him to go every 5 days. I think you need the ability to have another starter out there and potentially someone in the bullpen that can piggyback off him where you can have a quick hook. So I think there might be too much variability and too much that kind of hinges on this deal. Not only what the Marlins are asking for, but what the Mets would have to provide in their on their roster to make this a productive move and a feasible one. But I do think it is something to look out for because there is some smoke there, with Puma's comments about him becoming available and the Mets checking in. And I guess there was a Hector Gomez, take what he says with a grain of salt. But
Right.
Sandy has packed his bags and he is ready to go. So it'll be interesting. I do see this as maybe an option for a team like the Padres more so. Someone that is not necessarily focused on not focused on winning this year, but less so and more so on shedding salary and shedding guys on expiring deals and probably acquiring someone with a bit of control, someone that they can potentially develop to make a run next year and then the following year. So
that makes sense with what they're trying to do with Dylan Cease as well, who we have not mentioned, and
3-team deal.
we can, yeah, it could be a 3-team deal, honestly. If they are able to flip Dylan Cease for a bat and they're able to acquire Alcantara, it's basically buying them an extra year of an ace level, not an ace right now, but an ace level, I
Potentially.
guess, starter. Like that vision makes sense to me in what you just said. So I can definitely see that happening. Listen, I think that, it will take a lot for Sandy. And I think that would, I think that you're right. And I mentioned this on my podcast episode yesterday, in that if the asking price is high for Sandy, you try to convince them to throw in Bender and you got a deal no matter who they name that they want. I don't think it's going to be Beatty. I don't think that Beatty's going anywhere. And that has changed because I was for sure in this offseason that Beatty, if he didn't turn it around, he was going to be leaving. So, I think he's played his way onto this team and staying on this team. I think one prospect, if it's not Jet Williams, because they do have a couple of outfielders and they have a plethora of middle infielders in their top 10, the Marlins do, but who would say no to a number one prospect in an organization, a potential deal? I think Ryan Clifford could be someone that you can dangle in front of them. They don't really have much talent on the corners, especially at first base coming up. They don't really have their first baseman of the future on their roster right now. If it took, let's just say this, Sandy Alcantara for Ronnie Mauricio and Ryan Clifford, are you doing it?
Oh, yes. I don't know if the Marlins are. I did.
You
I
don't
will.
think that would get it done?
Yeah, I did put out a mock trade a few days ago for the Mets acquiring Edward Cabrera and Anthony Bender, and I think it would be fairly similar to that deal, probably a little bit less so given how Sandy has looked this year. But I think it would start with the likes of Ronnie Mauricio and Brandon Sproat, and then probably involve someone like Jacob Reimer.
Okay, then that makes sense too. Because I was
Maybe
going to say,
throw in
if
a lower tier, either bat or pitcher, depending on what the Marlins would like. Someone at the back end of the top 30. Maybe someone like Boston Barrow gets a little bit of hype, or someone like, I guess Will Watson's kind of moved up, but maybe someone like a Jonathan Pintaro would be something that the Marlins would be interested in. So I think
I
it
think
would.
I think it would take a third player, as Froze is saying in the chat. I think it would take a third player from the Mets, a little bit of a lower level player. Blade Tidwell, question mark. I don't know. Maybe you could throw in Blade Tidwell in that kind of deal and try to get a deal done. But I listen, I'm looking at, if you're telling me the Marlins don't know if they're gonna accept a deal like Clifford, Mauricio, and let's just say a lower level arm and Tidwell, like that's plenty of
That's
value going back for them. I feel like I think that's a respectable deal. And if they still say no to that, I'm looking elsewhere immediately, because there's no way you invest much more in Sandy at that point, given what he has produced. I think that the Marlins really, and by the way, the recent reports that Sandy is expecting to be traded. I talked about it yesterday. I mean, he's got his bags packed. I mean, literally, he has packed up his stuff and is expecting to be leaving Miami to go wherever he's traded to. So I think that this is happening. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's
I
hard
think
because this is kind of like a Robert situation from the pitching side, right? It really is kind of a similar scenario where you just don't know what these teams are expecting in return, and maybe they're just asking for too much for someone that has not shown, shown the best ability of themselves in a couple of years now.
Yeah, I think the Miami this deal would be pretty interesting, and I think given what Jeff Passan said a few days ago, he put out an article of basically the whole landscape of the trade deadline and what teams have available and what teams would be looking for in return in terms of prospects for those sellers. He highlighted that the Miami Marlins are in need of talent. And that I view as one thing and one thing alone. They're looking for high upside talent to infuse that minor league system and maybe potentially players that can and are MLB ready, like a Ronnie Mauricio, like a Ryan Clifford, who maybe isn't on the cusp of making the major leagues, but does have a big talent and someone that is having himself a very nice year in Double-A. And then you mentioned the name of Blade Tidwell. I think he's probably not someone that maybe the Marlins would be looking for, but maybe someone like Aracena that got traded yesterday to the Orioles, someone with some big talent but is a bit further away, just to kind of infuse that farm system with some much needed high upside potential type of players that could really boost the overall level of the farm system, but also allow them to have guys that can come up in a few years in the future and be able to provide for a team when they are in a better position to contend and make a push for a World Series. So it'll be interesting to see what they ask for. I mean, if the asking price starts with like what the Twins are asking for Duran and Jax in 2 top 100 prospects, I think you block the Miami Marlins, because I'm not trading any one of Jet Williams, Jonah Tong, Carson Bench, or Nolan McLean for him. I would maybe consider moving Brandon Sproat for him, even though he has shown in his last 3 starts that four or 5 starts actually, that he is turning a corner and finding it in AAA. But I think he's someone that the Mets would be comfortable moving, just given that his struggles, whereas someone like Nolan McLean has kind of flew through Double-A and into AAA and is flying there. And then someone like Jonah Tong, who is looking like a potential, top ace type candidate once he gets the call. So it'll be interesting to see what they do end up asking for.
Yeah, so that's the outlook of Sandy Alcantara. Again, I just have this feeling that if the Marlins
It's in the cards.
It's in the cards. That's all I'll say. I have a decent feeling about that if the price is right, so to speak. And that's for any trade, of course, but I do think that this is, if you're telling me one, not maybe so much under the radar, because there have been reports, but there have not really been any serious reports about like, oh, the Mets are super in on this guy. I think if I had to name one this trade deadline, it would be Sandy. And again, we've heard these 2 names, the Mets and Alcantara, being linked, before. But we'll see if it's a long shot or not. And that will be up to the Marlins. Let's talk more starting pitchers before we get out of here, as we're approaching an hour on the stream. 2 different looks here, especially with the controllability you've got and the age, of course. You've got a guy in Mitch Keller. And by the way, very similar numbers, I will say, especially this season. You've got Mitch Keller versus Merrill Kelly. Merrill Kelly's in his mid-30s. He's going to be a rental. He's having a really good season versus Mitch Keller, who's going to be, an unrestricted free agent after the 2028 season. So he's got a lot of controllability left, and you have the potential to package either of these guys. I don't think the Mets are going to, if they were to go after Merrill Kelly, it wouldn't be a package deal because they are presumably out on Eugenio Suarez. Oh, by the way, the Phillies are now being linked to is Suarez, especially with the Yankees shying away from Eugenio Suarez after the Ryan McMahon trade yesterday. But
I would hate that more than anything. I would sell the farm just to block that trade, just to spite the Phillies. That's a joke. By the way. I would not do that, but I would love to spite.
Well, it just sucks, man, because we all know, and we said this for quite some time, that the Phillies are going to be super aggressive. So if they end up with Suarez, I mean, what can you do? Listen,
just shake your head.
You just shake your head, exactly. Merrill Kelly, Mitch Keller. I'm gonna be right back in a couple seconds. So talk about these 2 pitchers, and I guess my main question for you is who would you prefer given the contract structures, right? Would you rather just see invest in a rental and then not really block up a rotation spot moving forward with the guys that you have coming up in the farm system, or would you rather have that solidified? And listen, Mitch Keller's not an ace. He's not an ace. He's a mid-level starter, and he has historically been a mid to back-end starter because there have been seasons where he's posted consistently over a 4 ERA. He just happens to have really good numbers this season, and he's under control, right? And I think a lot of people are talking up Mitch Keller to be something that he's not. He's a mid-level starter, as is Merrill Kelly. Like, let's not get it twisted. If you want a guy that could potentially be a number 2 for you, you're talking Seth Lugo, who we haven't mentioned on on this stream either. I would prefer Seth Lugo over both of these guys. I'll tell you that right now. I would, both of these guys. But I don't know if a reunion's in the cards. I think it would be a really good idea for the Mets to explore that option. But let me hear your thoughts on these two names and who you would prefer. The Mets maybe make a push for.
Yeah, of these two names, I think they're fairly similar in what they provide for you. I think Merrill Kelly offers you a little bit more in terms of swing and miss stuff with a little bit less lack of control. And for me personally, of the two guys, I much prefer Merrill Kelly. And like I said, with the swing and miss stuff, I think given what you're going to be going up against in the later stages of the season into the postseason, you're going to want a starting pitcher that can miss barrels and miss bats and keep hitters off balance more so than Mitch Keller, who is more of a pitch to contact type of pitcher. He does allow you the ability to get deeper just given his control, but Merrill Kelly is isn't shy to going deeper into games. I believe this season he's averaging over 5 2/3 innings per start. I think it's something like 5.8, which would be closer to that six inning mark. And I think that's something that's much needed for the Mets. And then given what the needs of both the Pirates and the Diamondbacks, I think it would be easier to swing a deal for Merrill Kelly, given that the Diamondbacks needs, given the trade that they made for, or the trade that they did giving Josh Naylor to the Mariners, they are in need of pitching. And Jeff Passan reported that, a couple of days ago in his deadline outlook report, and that was that the Diamondbacks are looking for pitching. And I think the Mets had the ability to ship off someone like a Blade Tidwell headlining that package and maybe another back end of the top 30 pitcher to kind of make that trade happen. And that would be something that I think every Met fan, including myself, would be more than comfortable doing. Maybe it costs you a third pitcher in that deal, given the prices of starting pitchers being very just unpredictable. But I do prefer Merrill Kelly over Mitch Keller, even with the contract coming into question. Mitch Keller will be under contract through 2028, so we'll have him for the 2026, 2027, and 2028 season. But that does create a problem in the sense that you do have 5 starting pitchers on the team right now. Your 5 starting pitchers are all under contract for next season, and everyone but David Peterson and Frankie Montas is under contract for another one. So you do essentially block Brandon Sproat, Nolan McLean, and potentially Jonah Tong, depending how quickly he can move through the system. And for me, given Merrill Kelly's performance in the 2023 playoffs, that's something that can't be understated. He's someone that has come up big for the Diamondbacks in the playoffs and can do that for the Mets. And I haven't seen his numbers. I wonder what they are against teams like the Phillies and the Dodgers. He does play the Dodgers a fair bit every year, being on the NL West. So it could be someone that you prefer, given the fact that he does see them and can maybe offer you a little bit more insight in that front. And just like I said before, the swing and miss stuff, his K rate is much higher than Mitch Keller, and he could potentially take over games more so than a guy like Mitch Keller.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that statement. I would also, of these two names, again, I told you that I'd prefer Seth Lugo in terms of the overall fit, also the statistics that he's posting in the Royals uniform, but Merrill Kelly also, I mean, he's just undeniable at this point. And I think that to keep roster flexibility, I will take the guy that has, the higher K rate as opposed to the guy that's posting a below average K rate, even though he walks less batters when you look at the walk rate between these two names. But I think to keep roster flexibility, I mean, I don't, unless the name is Sandy that we just talked about, I don't think the Mets are going to be in the market for a pitcher. That's why I'm not as confident that they go after a guy like Seth Lugo. I don't think that they're going to be on the in the market for a starter that has, controllability beyond this season. And I mean, I could be wrong. There wouldn't be any harm in that. because you wouldn't really need to be as reliant on a guy like, McLean and Jonah Tong to be the next, the best thing since sliced bread, right?
Mhm.
But, I don't know. I think that Merrill Kelly, the experience factor also does have a lot to do with it. He's done it in the playoffs. He's done it at a lot of a higher level than Mitch Keller. Just talking about that meaningful baseball, and he's done it against some better teams. I mean, you're right, in that division that he's in and the teams that he's faced. That's something that is definitely a factor in this as well. So, not on the numbers, I don't really care about the discrepancy here in terms of the ERA. They're both at a pretty similar innings pitched, 122 versus 125 for Mitch Keller, but really the strikeout rate, I'll take the higher walk rate if you give me more strikeouts. But I think that Merrill Kelly provides a lot more roster flexibility in the long run than Mitch Keller. Okay,
He's been
not
awful
to
against the
like,
Dodgers, by the way. He's 0-11 with an over 5 ERA. I just looked that up.
against the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Let's look up Mitch Keller though, because I always hear Mitch Keller this, Mitch Keller that. Like, yeah, he's got a really good arsenal. He's got like 6 or 7 pitches. He can throw the kitchen sink at you, but like, let's look at what he's historically been. And by the way, he did, post a really good outing against the Mets in Pittsburgh when we were both in Pittsburgh. But like last season, 4.25 over 178 innings. Season before that, like he's posted his best season was the COVID year, 2.91. This has really been his best season of his career in a full season. Like he's having a career year, just like a guy like Edward Cabrera over there in the Marlins organization. But the last 2 seasons, he was an all-star. I'm sure he had a better first half than he did a second half, but his all-star season in 2023, he finished with a 4.21 ERA, right? The FIP,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can look at the FIP, maybe some unluckiness there, but expected stats are just that. I mean, they're not the overall stats, they're not the overall production. If baseball was based off of expected stats solely, they're a good tool, but then it would be a different game. It would be a different game. But unfortunately, it's just kind of a tool to use to try to project out a player for the long haul. And for quite some time now, Mitch Keller just has not been a top level starter. He's a mid starter, and that's really it. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because I just feel like that's the one name that Mets fans and in this fan base have been talking about for quite some time is Mitch Keller, Mitch Keller, Mitch Keller. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
all fine if they target Mitch Keller. Like I don't have anything against him, but I just think that Mets fans believe he's something that he's not. And I'm not as high on his upside as maybe some other people. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, neither am I. Neither am I. And the one interesting thing to focus with both of these guys in particular is the fact that there are bullpen options from both the Diamondbacks and the Pirates. The Mets could be open to, and if you could swing a potential combo deal, getting David Bednar with Mitch Keller, maybe Dennis Santana, or Merrill Kelly. Shelby Miller would be someone I would focus on from the Diamondbacks. Jalen Beeks could have been an option, but given the fact that they got Gregory Soto, is probably off the table for them. It makes things a little bit more interesting because they could be shopping on that front and trying to, take one of these relievers away from them to add to their bullpen, and then maybe turn their focus strictly towards offense if they were to get two needs from one team there. So it'll be interesting to see what materializes on that front. And I think since I think it was about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when the Mitch Keller news originally came out, the Mets might be interested in him. That's kind of quieted down. Whereas Merrill Kelly, we haven't really heard much, but Nightingale did mention that he does. He actually predicted that the Mets do get Merrill Kelly, so that will be interesting to see if maybe there is something there that he's heard and has not really come out yet. So we'll see what happens. I think the Mets are due for a starting pitcher. I think that they would be shopping on the rental market. And I know you said you like Seth Lugo above both of them. I do disagree in that front. I think Merrill Kelly is still my preferred option in terms of rentals that are a little bit more realistic. Dylan Cease being my favorite of the bunch, but I think that might be a little bit dicey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any world. I think we've said this multiple times on all of our streams and videos that I don't think both of us, either of us, see a world where Dylan Cease is a New York Met this trade deadline. I think that the Padres are just content on dealing him to an AL team somewhere in the AL East that can give him a decent package. Of course, they tried to propose that Jarren Duran trade, and they're probably trying to, if they're able to pull this off and get something of value back for Dylan Cease that they want in their lineup, I think that they're all in on Sandy Alcantara. I do think so. I think that that is their play. So we'll see. Any other, I mean, and by the way, I see a lot of people talking about bullpen arms. Like, yes, there's 100% going to be another bullpen arm coming to the New York Mets, as Andy Martino stated yesterday. I mean, he
Heyman came
basically
out
said,
like 30 minutes ago and said that the Mets are still in the market for another reliever. He said that
yeah,
they're shopping around for pretty much everyone. So we'll see what
yep,
happens. I guess it's open market with the Mets. I guess they're shopping at all ends of the spectrum here, whether it's high end, mid end, or even low end guys. So I think the Mets will 100% be getting a right-handed arm for the bullpen, and maybe it will be someone of a little bit higher caliber than we were expecting. So that'll be interesting to see what happens and who becomes available and the asking price of these guys. I guess Johan Duran and Griffin Jackson are probably a little bit out of the Mets budget, given what the Twins were asking, but maybe someone like you mentioned, David Bednar and Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals could be options for the Mets.
yeah. And this is a good point, though. Like, I don't know. Stearns has done both. He's gotten controllability and he's gotten rental players, especially last season, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we've seen
3
it.
rentals last year.
We've seen both. I think he's got a good understanding of being a flex, type of president of baseball operations that is willing to get both depending on each positional outlook in the future for this organization. So I don't think that he's not totally. Maybe he does look into the controllability aspect a little bit more than the rentals,
Mm-hmm.
but as acting president of baseball operations, in the Mets organization thus far in his tenure, he has shown the ability and willingness to do both. So I won't label him as one or the other.
Yeah, and he did make some comments earlier in the week that he said that while he was with the Brewers, he was definitely focusing more on getting controllable players because I guess because of the limitations of their payroll. But here in New York, with Steve Cohen's checkbook backing him, he's definitely he's more able to go after rental pieces with the ability to sign people in the deadline and not have to worry about who he's going to fill how he's going to fill the roster come next season when you are able to basically sign anyone you want given what Steve Cohen's is allowing him to do. So there is that to factor in. And it's not something that we really got to see last trade deadline, even though the bigger trades that we didn't make, for guys like Ryan Stanek, Jesse Winker, and Phil Maton were all rental pieces, So you already saw it as early as last season. While that might not have been the blockbuster deadline that people were expecting, this team was not necessarily built for a long run. So this is a team that is, and I expect a bunch of rental pieces to come into this team this trade deadline. We already started with one in Gregory Soto, who will be a free agent after the season. So we will see more of that this trade deadline and going forward in the future.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, we're approaching an hour and 15 minutes on this stream, so I think that's going to do it for us talking about the Mets' needs or wants, a lot of different outlooks, situational outlooks for the New York Mets at this deadline, and a deadline that is filled. I mean, absolutely filled with endless possibilities for a lot of organizations. But I think that as we started off the stream with, some of these reports, from Mike Puma especially, we're going to start seeing a little bit more method to David Stearns' madness, I guess, starting tomorrow night when teams around the league get a good idea of who's buying and who's selling. So I definitely appreciate everyone tuning in. I am not available for the post game, just by the way, because it is game 2 today at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Unfortunately, I will be going on vacation starting tomorrow. So I'm hoping to keep you all in the loop via a lot of short videos, a lot of shorts on the channel. We'll see how many long form content video content I can do. But bear with me. I definitely appreciate it. It's not the most ideal time to go on vacation, but vacation is vacation nonetheless. And I'll take it anytime I can get it. So I love what we're talking about here. I think that this team has work to do, but I think that, especially with the Soto move yesterday, they are well on their way to doing it. Go out there. I think we might do a pregame today, depending on the time. I think
Yeah.
Rob was reaching out. So if we do, be on the lookout for a pregame show today before game 2, Mets versus Giants. Go out there, take a series. You're not going to get any help from the Yankees. Clearly, they're losing 2-0 right now. So as it pertains to this deadline, though, a lot of good discussions. We've talked about a lot of names in this stream. For those of you who are just tuning in, feel free to check out all the content on the channel using the links below in the description. But also, if you want to rewind this stream, if you missed anything, we talked about Robert Jr., we talked about Ramon Laureano, we talked about a plethora of bullpen options and starters like Sandy Alcantara. We talked about Dylan Cease, Mitch Keller, Merrill Kelly. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So a lot of good names that are available. And by the way, we missed a lot of names too in this stream. Like, we didn't talk about an exhaustive list. So there's a lot of other options out there even still. As always, Zach, I appreciate you. I appreciate the chat being lively, being engaged, and I definitely appreciate everyone sharing their thoughts and opinions. But please do not forget to hit the thumbs up on this stream. Again, continue to subscribe to the channel. I definitely appreciate it. And follow us on social media individually at True Mets Talk over on X and Instagram. And I also have TikTok as well, if you all are interested in seeing a little bit more videos there, more video breakdowns. And also follow Zach. Really good work on a lot of the mock trades and proposals and just talking Mets baseball in general over on his account. You can find him at Sunny Days Zach over on X. Zach, I appreciate it. Until our next collaboration with the video or stream, I will see you all later. Let's go Mets in game 2 on the West Coast tonight. Peace.
Peace. Let's go Mets.